When Daniel Crowther returned to his small cabin in the Arizona highlands that warm, dusty afternoon, he expected nothing more than a quiet evening. His trip to the nearest town had taken 3 days, and his horse was tired. Daniel himself felt worn out, coated in trail dust from head to toe. He dreamed only of resting, maybe drinking cool water from the well, and letting the silence of the desert settle around him. But as he rode closer, he sensed something off. It began with the birds. Usually, they filled the air with steady songs, but now the land felt strangely still. No flutter of wings, no breeze whispering through the scrub brush. Even his horse twitched its ears uneasily. Daniel slowed his pace. Something had disturbed the area around his home. As he reached the clearing, he noticed fresh tracks near the door light, careful footprints that didn't belong to him. His heart thumped once, hard. The cabin door, which he had closed before leaving, now hung slightly open. Daniel slid down from his horse with slow, quiet steps. He wasn't afraid, just cautious. He lived far from town, and strangers rarely wandered this deep into the land unless they were lost or in trouble. He placed his hand on the door and gently pushed it open. At first, he thought the cabin was empty. Sunlight streamed in from the small window, spreading long golden strips of light across the wooden floor. Dust floated peacefully in the air, as if the room had been still for hours. Nothing seemed broken or stolen. Then he heard a soft sound like a weak breath. Daniel's eyes moved to the far corner of the room where his old blanket lay on the floor. Someone was beneath it. He stepped closer, keeping his voice calm. "Hello?" The blanket shifted slightly. A woman's face appeared, tired and pale. Her long dark hair was tangled, and her skin carried dust from travel. She looked like she had pushed herself past her limits. Her eyes opened halfway, meeting Daniel's with a mixture of fear and relief. She was an Apache woman, young but strong-looking despite her current state. The moment Daniel saw her expression, he understood she wasn't here by choice. She needed help. Her clothes were not properly arranged, not because she meant anything improper, but because she had tried to treat a large injury on her shoulder. The fabric near it had been cut open by her own hand, probably to clean or examine the wound. She had done what she could alone, but exhaustion had taken over before she could finish. Daniel quickly looked away to give her privacy while he gently grabbed his spare blanket and set it beside her without touching her. "You're safe," he said softly. "I won't harm you. You can cover yourself." Even in her weakness, her hands moved to pull the blanket around her. Once she was covered, Daniel knelt a short distance away so she wouldn't feel threatened. "How long have you been here?" he asked. The woman opened her mouth, but the words barely came out. Her voice was dry, and her breathing shallow. Daniel rose and poured water into a cup. He held it out carefully. She hesitated, studying him as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached for the cup. She sipped the water, and Daniel could see how much strength it took for her just to lift it. When she finished, she whispered something so faint Daniel almost missed it. "Please, help." There was no fear left in her voice, only exhaustion and hope. Daniel nodded. "I will." He fetched his medical supplies, clean cloth, herbs, and a small jar of salve given to him by a healer months ago. As he approached her again, he made sure his steps were gentle and slow, giving her space to breathe. "May I look at your shoulder?" he asked. She met his eyes again. This time, she nodded. He carefully peeled back the blanket just enough to see the injured area, keeping everything else covered to ensure her comfort and dignity. The wound wasn't fresh. It looked like she had fallen or scraped against something rough. It wasn't dangerous, but without proper care, it could have worsened. Daniel cleaned the area with warm water. The woman winced slightly, but she didn't pull away. Her strength surprised him. Once the wound was clean, he wrapped her shoulder with strips of cloth, steady and careful, making sure not to cause her more discomfort. "You did well," he said softly. "You'll heal." She closed her eyes for a brief moment, maybe from relief, maybe from exhaustion. When she opened them again, her voice was a little clearer. "My name, Ayanna." Daniel smiled gently. "I'm Daniel. You're welcome to rest here." Until you get better. Ayanna blinked slowly, as if trying to stay awake but losing the battle. Her breathing steadied, becoming calmer. Daniel realized she might not have slept properly for days. He stood and moved quietly around the cabin, closing the door and placing a wooden beam across it for protection. He checked the windows, making sure everything was secure. He didn't know why she had come, or what she had escaped from, but one thing was clear: she had been running. And she had trusted his home to keep her safe. He returned to her side and placed a cup of water and a small bowl of mashed herbs beside her. "When you wake, drink more water," he said softly, unsure if she could hear him. "You're safe here." Ayanna's eyes fluttered open for a moment. She whispered something, too quiet to fully understand, but it sounded like, "Thank you." Daniel felt a strange weight lift from his chest. He wasn't used to caring for others. Life in the Highlands was lonely, simple, and quiet. But now, his home held someone who needed shelter. And he felt a strong sense of responsibility. He sat a few feet away, not wanting to disturb her but wanting to stay close enough in case she needed anything. For a while, he simply listened to her quiet breathing. She was finally slipping into a deep, healing sleep. As the minutes passed, Daniel noticed more small signs around the cabin: scuffed footprints near the door, broken branches outside, and marks on the ground, as if someone had been searching or moving around in a hurry. It worried him. Whoever had frightened Ayanna might still be out there, but he didn't let the worry reach his expression. Instead, he focused on the stillness inside the cabin. The fading sunlight painted warm colors across the floor. The outside world felt distant for a moment. Ayanna shifted slightly in her sleep, murmuring something in her native language. Daniel didn't understand it, but the tone sounded troubled, as if she were dreaming of whatever danger she had faced. He quietly added more wood to the fire, making sure the room stayed warm. He didn't want the cold desert night to worsen her condition. Once the flames grew steady, he sat back again and watched over her. The hours passed slowly. The sky turned from orange to soft purple, then into the deep blue of night. Stars filled the sky, bright, endless, peaceful. Daniel thought of how unexpected this day had been. One moment he was riding home, tired but content. The next, he was tending to a stranger who had arrived at his doorstep hurt and alone. But despite the surprise, he felt no regret. Something about Ayanna's presence stirred a protective feeling in him. He didn't know her story yet, didn't know who or what she had escaped, but he knew one thing for certain: she had chosen his home as her refuge, and he would not let harm come to her. As the fire crackled softly, Daniel leaned back and kept watch through the quiet night, ready for whatever dawn might bring. When the first soft light of morning touched the cabin walls, Daniel woke to the quiet sound of someone moving. For a moment he wondered if he had imagined it, but then he heard a tiny rustle again, the kind that comes from someone trying not to make noise. He looked toward the corner where Ayanna had been resting. She was awake now, sitting up with the blanket wrapped carefully around her shoulders. Her movements were slow, but she looked much more alert than the night before. Her dark eyes studied the room as if trying to understand where she was and how she had arrived there. Daniel rose from his seat gently, not wanting to startle her. "Good morning," he said in a friendly tone. Ayanna's gaze turned to him. The fear he had seen earlier was still there, but softer now, mixed with uncertainty and gratitude. She nodded slightly. "You slept well?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke in a quiet voice. "Better than before." Her English was soft but understandable. Daniel smiled kindly. "I'm glad. You needed rest." She looked down at her bandaged shoulder, touching it lightly with her fingertips. The bandage had stayed in place throughout the night. "You helped me," she said. Daniel shook his head. Anyone would have. But Ayanna gave him a look that said she didn't fully believe that. She lifted her eyes to meet his again. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "You're safe here. But, if you're comfortable, I'd like to understand what happened. Only if you want to tell me." Ayanna looked away for a long moment. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the blanket as if she were remembering something difficult. The silence stretched across the room, gentle but heavy with meaning. Finally, she spoke. "I was with my family," she began slowly. "We were traveling. A group of people came toward us. They did not mean harm, but they were looking for someone. They asked many questions. Some words were sharp. Some made us uneasy." She paused, choosing her words with care. "My family wished to avoid trouble. We tried to take another path, but I became separated from them. I tried to find them again, but the land became confusing." Daniel listened with his full attention, making sure she didn't feel rushed. "I walked for many hours," she continued. "Then I hurt my shoulder. Not badly, but enough to slow me. I became weak. The sun was too strong. I saw your cabin. I thought, maybe I can rest here. I hoped someone kind lived inside." "And you were right," Daniel said gently. Ayanna gave him a soft, almost shy smile. Daniel moved to the small table and poured warm water into a cup. He added a few drops of the healing herbs the old local healer had given him. "Drink this," he said. "It might help you get your strength back." Ayanna accepted it slowly, sipping with small, careful movements. After a few moments, she gained a bit of color in her cheeks. "You can stay as long as you need," Daniel said. "There's no hurry. Once you feel strong, we can find your family together." Ayanna blinked, surprised. "You would help me?" "Of course," he said simply. "You're not alone." Something in her expression shifted like a tight knot inside her had loosened. She lowered her eyes, almost embarrassed by the kindness. "I thought I would be lost," she confessed softly. "The land feels different when someone is alone." Daniel understood that very well. He had spent years living on the edge of the quiet desert plains. The land was beautiful, but large and silent. And sometimes silence could feel heavier than noise. "You're safe here," he repeated. Ayanna nodded and pulled the blanket closer around herself. Her posture was still careful, but she no longer looked frightened, only tired, thoughtful, and grateful. For a moment, the cabin felt calm and full of warmth. The morning sunlight glowed across the wooden floor, and the small fire crackled softly in the fireplace. Dust motes floated gently in the air, dancing in the warm light. It felt peaceful, like the world had paused for a while. After a few minutes, Ayanna spoke again. "I did not want to enter your home without permission," she said softly. "But the sky was growing dark, and I felt dizzy. I hoped you would understand." "I understand completely," Daniel said. "You did the right thing." Her eyes softened again. Daniel stood and grabbed a small basket. "I'll make something simple for breakfast. You need food." Ayanna watched him as he moved around the cabin, gathering dry fruit, bread he had bought in town, and warm tea leaves. She looked curious, almost fascinated by how calmly he worked. As he prepared their meal, Ayanna spoke again, voice faint but honest. "You are not afraid?" she asked. "Of you?" Daniel smiled. "No. You came here seeking help, not harm." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to decide how someone could be so steady in a world that often felt unpredictable. After breakfast, which Ayanna ate slowly but fully, Daniel checked her shoulder again. He asked before touching the bandage, and she agreed. The skin around the wound looked better, not healed, but no longer strained. "You're recovering fast," he said. She nodded. "Your help made it easier." Daniel stepped back to give her space again. He noticed her eyes move toward the window, scanning the land outside. "Are you worried someone might come looking for you?" he asked gently. Ayanna hesitated before answering. "I do not know," she said. "The people who asked questions, they did not feel peaceful. But I do not think they followed me. I think they were only confused and searching for someone else." "Still," Daniel said softly, "you're safe here. Nothing will trouble you." Ayanna gave him a small, grateful nod. For the next hour, she rested more. Daniel worked quietly around the cabin, fixing a loose board, brushing his horse, and checking the water barrel outside. While doing these tasks, his thoughts kept drifting back to Ayanna. He couldn't explain it. But something about her presence felt important, like her arrival had changed the path of his days. He didn't feel burdened by it. Instead, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't noticed in a long time. When he returned inside, Ayanna was awake again and watching the small fire. "Do you live alone always?" she asked. Daniel sat in the chair across from her. "Mostly," he said. "I have neighbors, but they're far away. I go into town sometimes. But I prefer the quiet here." Ayanna nodded slowly. "The land here is wide," she said softly. "It listens to everything. It holds stories. Ayanna, it listens to be in some of. It listens to everything." Daniel smiled. "I never thought of it that way." "It is true," she said, touching her chest lightly. "When the land is quiet, people must listen more to their hearts." Daniel wasn't used to hearing words like that. They held a peaceful wisdom that made him look at the world differently. He admired the gentle way she spoke, even though she was still weak. Later, when the sun climbed higher, Daniel stepped outside to gather more water and check the path leading to the cabin. He didn't see anything troubling, just the normal patterns of animals, the soft wind through the brush, and the distant stretch of hills. But something in the air felt thoughtful, like the world was waiting. While he walked back inside, Ayanna looked up. "Is everything quiet?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said. She seemed relieved. "Daniel," she began slowly. "I did not think anyone would help me this way." "You deserve help," he replied. She lowered her eyes again. "In my heart, I hope my family is safe. I hope they know I am safe too." "We'll find them," Daniel said. "When you're strong, we'll look together." Ayanna wrapped the blanket around her more firmly, as if holding on to his promise. Her voice dropped to a gentle whisper. "I believe you." The cabin grew calm again, filled only with the sound of the wind passing by outside. The day moved softly, carrying a feeling of connection neither fully understood yet. Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest, a feeling that told him this was no ordinary encounter. Ayanna, though tired and uncertain, seemed to sense the same thing. Her eyes held a quiet trust now, a trust she had not given easily. The world outside was large and unpredictable, but inside the small wooden cabin, something new had begun to form. A bond, a quiet promise, a sense of safety neither had expected, and though neither said it aloud, both knew that their paths, once separate, now touched in a way the morning sun gently revealed one warm ray at a time. The sun was beginning to set when Daniel stepped outside to check the sky. The clouds were soft and golden, and the warm colors stretched over the land like a painted blanket. The air felt calm, but there was something about the quiet that made him think deeply. It wasn't fear, only a gentle alertness, like a whisper from the land itself. Ayanna had slept most of the afternoon. Her body needed rest, and Daniel didn't want to disturb her. Every time she woke, she looked stronger. Her eyes had more light in them, and she no longer looked lost or confused. Still, she wasn't fully herself yet. While Daniel stood outside, he heard the soft sound of the cabin door opening. He turned to see Ayanna standing in the doorway. Wrapped in the blanket, she looked small in the growing evening, but somehow the glow of the setting sun made her appear peaceful and strong at the same time. "You should be resting," Daniel said softly. "I rested enough," she replied, stepping out carefully. "I wanted fresh air." He nodded and helped her sit on a wooden bench near the cabin. The evening breeze touched her hair gently, and she closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying it. "It is beautiful here," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel agreed. "It's quiet most days." Ayanna looked around slowly, taking in the land, its colors, its stillness, its wide open sky. She pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. "I felt something today," she said quietly. "A small worry. Only a small one." Daniel sat beside her but kept a respectful distance. "What kind of worry?" Ayanna didn't answer immediately. She looked toward the horizon as if listening to something inside her heart. "Sometimes," she began slowly, "the land speaks in ways that are not loud. When I woke earlier, I felt eyes on me. Not bad eyes. Just watching. Daniel didn't dismiss her feeling. Living alone in the highlands had taught him that intuition mattered. Sometimes the land did send signs, and people who listened carefully heard them first. He turned his head slightly. "Do you think someone is nearby?" Ayanna hesitated. "I am not sure. Maybe it is only my thoughts. When someone spends many hours alone, the mind becomes too loud sometimes." Daniel considered this. "I understand. But we can be cautious without worrying too much." She nodded. For a few minutes, they simply sat together quietly. The sky turned deeper, shades of orange and pink. Birds flew across the horizon, and the distant sound of evening insects rose softly. Daniel broke the silence gently. "If there is someone nearby, it doesn't mean trouble. People travel through here sometimes." "Yes," she agreed. "But I want to be honest with you." He looked at her with calm attention. "There were people asking questions about someone," Ayanna said. "I do not know who." Their words felt heavy. "That is why I moved away from them. Not because they were harmful, just because they carried too much tension." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Ayanna pulled the blanket a little tighter. "If they passed through this area, maybe they are still wondering about my family. Or maybe they are searching for another path. I'll be on this now." Ayanna pulled the blanket a little tighter. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "If they're nearby, they might simply be travelers. But even if they do come close, we can speak to them politely. There is nothing here to hide." Ayanna looked relieved at his calmness. "You speak as if everything has a gentle solution," she said softly. Daniel smiled a little. "It's easier to live that way." She looked at him, studying the lines of his face. "Your home feels safe," she said. "Even if the world outside is unsure." That simple sentence touched Daniel more than she knew. He had built his cabin alone, plank by plank, in hopes of creating a peaceful life. Hearing that someone felt safe inside, it made all his efforts feel worth it. As evening deepened, they went back inside. Daniel lit a small lantern, which filled the cabin with warm golden light. Ayanna sat near the fire, warming her hands. Suddenly, she paused. "Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. Daniel listened. At first, he heard nothing unusual, just the crackle of the fire and the soft sigh of wind outside. But then he caught a faint sound. Not footsteps, not voices, only a light movement, like the shifting of branches far away. "It might be an animal," Daniel said gently. "There are deer around here. They come close sometimes, looking for water." And Ayanna didn't look frightened, only thoughtful. "Yes. Maybe it is a deer." "Known." Daniel moved to the window and looked out. The land was peaceful. Nothing unusual moved in the distance. Still, he felt something like the quiet before a visitor arrives. Not dangerous. Simply expectant. He returned to Ayanna. "Are you tired?" "A little," she admitted. "But my heart is not fully quiet yet." "Would you like to talk?" Daniel asked. "Sometimes that helps." Ayanna nodded. She began speaking softly about her family, how they traveled through the land, always finding balance with nature. How her people taught her to read signs from the wind, the sky, and the earth. How kindness was valued more than anything else. Daniel listened closely, appreciating the gentle rhythm of her voice. He realized she saw the world very differently than he did, yet her view made everything feel deeper, more meaningful. "And you?" she asked suddenly. "Why do you live alone here?" Daniel smiled softly. "I wanted peace. Life in towns and cities felt loud. The world moved too fast. Here, I can hear my own thoughts. I can breathe." Ayanna nodded as if she understood perfectly. "But sometimes," Daniel added quietly, "peace can feel too empty." Ayanna looked at him with warm eyes. "You speak from your heart." He wasn't used to someone noticing that. The fire crackled softly again, filling the room with comfort. But then Daniel heard a faint sound, a gentle tap, almost like a hand brushing against something outside. He didn't jump or worry. He just listened. Ayanna looked at him. "You hear it too?" He nodded. "Yes. But whatever it is, it sounds calm." They both stood and moved slowly to the door. Daniel opened it a small amount and looked out. The moon had risen, bright and clear. Its light washed over the land, silver and peaceful. Then Daniel saw something near the edge of the trees, not a person, not an animal, but a pair of footprints, fresh ones. Ayanna saw them too. "They came close," she said softly. "But they did not stay." Daniel examined the ground more carefully. The footprints didn't lead toward the cabin, they moved past it, as if someone had walked by quietly, choosing not to disturb anything. "Whoever it was," Daniel said calmly. "They weren't trying to harm anyone. Maybe they were simply passing." Ayanna nodded but looked thoughtful again. "Sometimes people walk near others without wanting to be seen. Maybe they only wanted to know if this place was safe before they moved forward." Daniel closed the door gently. "Well, if they come again, we'll greet them kindly. There's nothing here but peace." Ayanna looked at him for a long moment, her eyes softening. "You are not afraid of unexpected things," he smiled. "Life brings surprises. It's easier to accept them than fight them." She sat down again, her heartbeat calmer now. Daniel placed more wood in the fire, and the cabin grew warm once more. Ayanna wrapped the blanket around her as if it were a shield of comfort. The faint worry in her face faded, little by little, replaced with trust. Finally, she whispered, "Daniel, thank you for standing with me when I feel unsure." He met her eyes gently. "You don't have to face anything alone." The rest of the night passed peacefully. Maybe the quiet watcher outside had moved on. Maybe it was only a traveler, or someone searching for a path through the valley. But inside the cabin, something important had changed. Ayanna no longer felt alone. Daniel no longer felt empty. And the land outside, though wide and mysterious, no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt like a story that was slowly unfolding one step at a time. The morning sun slipped gently into the cabin through the small window, touching the room with a soft golden glow. Daniel woke to the peaceful warmth, stretching quietly so he wouldn't disturb Ayanna, who slept near the fire with the blanket wrapped around her. Her breathing was calm, steady, and full of new strength. He smiled softly to himself. She had changed so much in only a short time. When she first arrived, she had been weak, frightened, and unsure of the world around her. Now she looked peaceful, almost glowing in the gentle morning light. Daniel stepped outside to breathe the fresh air. The world felt clean and calm. The distant hills were painted with morning colors, and the wind carried the sweet scent of warm soil. Everything felt fresh, like a new chapter was waiting. After a few minutes, Daniel heard the door open. Ayanna stepped outside slowly, her blanket wrapped neatly around her, her hair falling gently over her shoulders. Her eyes met his, and she offered a small smile. "You woke early," she said softly. "So did you," Daniel replied, with a warm smile of his own. "How do you feel?" "Better," she answered. "Much better. My shoulder does not hurt, as it did before, and my heart feels lighter." Daniel was glad to hear it. "You look stronger today." Ayanna looked out at the land, her eyes soft and thoughtful. "The world feels different this morning." "How so?" Daniel asked. She took a slow breath. "It feels peaceful, as if something inside me has settled." Daniel nodded. "That's good. That's very good." They both stood quietly for a moment, watching the sunrise. It painted their faces in warm tones and made the grass sparkle with morning dew. There was something magical about the silence between them, comfortable and full of meaning. Finally, Ayanna spoke again. "Daniel, there is something I must tell you." He turned to her, giving her his full attention. "The words I spoke the night you found me," she said gently. "The words, 'I'm your wife.' I want to explain their true meaning." Daniel felt his heart pause. The memory came back to him the moment Ayanna whispered the phrase, while half-conscious, weak, and frightened. He had never been sure what she meant, and he didn't want to misunderstand her. Ayanna lifted her eyes to his, calm and sincere. "In my culture," she said, "those words are not spoken to claim someone, or to promise marriage in the way you may think. They are words of deep trust. Words that say, 'I place my life in your care. I believe you will protect my spirit and my safety while I recover.'" Daniel listened closely, his expression gentle. "It is not a romantic promise," she continued. "It is a spiritual one. The moment you helped me, without fear, without hesitation, you took the role of someone who cares for another human life. And for that moment of my weakness, I trusted you completely." Daniel felt something warm rise in his chest. He had not known the true weight of her words, but hearing them now filled him with deep respect. "Ayanna," he said softly, "I honored your trust then, and I honor it now. But you don't owe me anything. You are free. You have always been free." Ayanna gave him a soft smile that made her eyes shine. "I know, and that is what makes your kindness even stronger." She stepped a little closer to him, her voice growing even softer. "Now that my strength is returning, the meaning of those words changes. They no longer mean I depend on you. They now mean, I choose to walk beside you, not because I must, but because my heart feels safe near yours." Daniel felt surprised and deeply moved. He had lived many quiet years, never expecting someone like Ayanna to step into his life. Yet here she was calm, graceful, and honest with words that touched him more deeply than he could express. "Are you saying you want to stay?" he asked gently. Ayanna looked out at the land again, then back at him. "Yes. For now. Until I find my family. And maybe even longer, if life allows. But first, I wish to see them. I want them to know I am safe." Daniel nodded. "We will look for them today. You're strong enough now." Ayanna smiled gratefully. "Thank you." They shared breakfast by the fireplace, warm tea, bread, and fruit. Ayanna ate slowly, her movements graceful and thoughtful. Daniel watched her quietly, feeling something deep inside him settle. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he knew their bond had grown into something important. After breakfast, they walked outside together. The land spread before them, wide, beautiful, full of promise. The wind brushed gently against their faces. Ayanna lifted her hand slightly, letting the breeze pass through her fingers. "My people say that the wind carries messages," she said softly. "Sometimes it brings warnings. Other times, it brings hope." "What do you feel now?" Daniel asked. "Hope," she said with quiet certainty. Daniel saddled his horse and prepared a gentle seat for Ayanna so she could ride comfortably. She watched him with appreciation. "You take care of everything with such calm hands," she said. He chuckled. "Comes from living alone for a long time. Maybe now," she said thoughtfully, "you do not have to live alone." Daniel didn't respond at first. Her words touched him deeply. He helped her onto the horse, making sure she was comfortable, then climbed up behind her to guide the reins. They began their journey through the soft morning light. The land around them buzzed quietly with life, birds calling, the wind rustling through the brush, and the warm sun rising higher into the sky. After a while, Ayanna turned her head slightly. "Daniel." "Yes?" "Last night, when I rested, I felt a calm inside me I have not felt in many days. I believe the person who walked near the cabin meant no harm. I think they were only searching for someone, or something, perhaps even trying to avoid us." Daniel nodded. "I think so too. I also felt something else," she whispered, "as if the world was telling me, this path with you is the right one." Daniel felt a warmth spread through him. "I'm glad you feel that way." They continued riding until they reached a wide ridge that overlooked a valley. Ayanna held her breath. In the distance, thin trails of smoke rose from a small camp. "That looks like your people," Daniel said quietly. Ayanna's eyes filled with soft emotion. "Yes, I think it is." Daniel guided the horse slowly down the path. As they approached the area, Ayana suddenly placed her hand over his. "Wait," she said gently. "Before we go further, there is something more I must say." Daniel stopped the horse and looked at her curiously. Ayana turned fully toward him, her blanket falling softly around her shoulders. Her eyes were shining with honesty. "When I whispered, 'I'm your wife' that night, it was a vow of trust. But now my heart speaks different words. Words I have not said yet because I carry them carefully." Daniel's breath caught. "What words?" She looked into his eyes with a quiet bravery. "I feel close to you. Not because you saved me, but because your spirit feels familiar. As if we walked the same path before we even met." Daniel felt his chest tighten gently, not with fear, but with a feeling so warm it felt like sunlight inside him. "Ayana," he said softly, "I feel that too." The wind moved softly around them, almost as if blessing their moment. She smiled a soft, beautiful smile. "Let us meet my family. And after that, let us see where our hearts choose to walk." Daniel nodded. "Together." Ayana placed her hand over his, steady and warm. "Yes," she whispered. "Together." With quiet hearts and hopeful spirits, they guided the horse down into the valley, toward the people who waited, toward the life Ayana had come from, and toward the future they had not yet spoken aloud, but both felt clearly. A future built on trust, kindness, and the gentle beginnings of something beautiful.